Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Witches of the Moon, Season 11, Week 11. I do believe this is. Yes, it is. So, make sure I stay on track. And I do this like every week, right? This week we are talking about the use of animal parts and the ethics in that in the craft. Now, this I'm sure is going to be a controversial week because I know that there are a lot of people who do not use animal parts in their practice, and if you don't, that's okay. If you do, that's also okay. I would say that my personal choice. I use animal parts in my practice, but my personal choice is I could never purposely harm an animal under any circumstances, except I do eat meat. So, but I personally could not hurt the animal. Honestly, if it came down to you need to hunt or you need to die, I'll probably lose a lot of weight and die because I don't think I could do it. Now, if my kids were going to die, that would be a totally different thing. I could probably take the animal down. I wouldn't know what to do with it anyway, yeah, I wouldn't know what to do with it after that. However, let me just get to the crux of this video. I do use animal parts in my video, but my animal parts are things that I come across on the ground naturally. So if there is an animal that has expired, like I've found frogs, we often have little geckos around here, and you'll find them expired often. Either they've been into a fight with another gecko, or they've been attacked by something else, or they just die. So, like anything else, it has a life cycle and it dies. And so, if it's not consumed by the ant population that's rampant around here, it may be something that I pick up and put into my critter jar that I use. I use wasps. I use cicada husks because I like those for transformational magic. I use dragonflies. We have a lot of those around here. They're very good for fey work, but they will also expire. They don't have a very long lifespan. Another creature that I use, and these are pretty unusual around here. This little guy, I don't know what happened to him. I found him on the ground yesterday. This is what's called a green June beetle. Usually they're brown. Trying to get him up close to the camera because he has a really iridescent belly, and then he's very, keep him turned around there, green. Now, I did not know this until recently, but the June bug, as we call them around here, is related to a scarab beetle from Egypt, and I've never seen a green one before until this year, and this is literally like the fifth one I found. I'm finding them about one a week. I will use eggshells, which I also acquire from natural sources. I'll find them on the ground or in an abandoned nest, and yes, I always make sure the nest is abandoned. I'm pretty familiar with my birds that take residence up in my trees, and so I had a nest that was abandoned, and the mom abandoned the egg. She'd actually pushed it out of the nest a couple of times, but I didn't want the dogs to get a hold of it. So another thing that I will use in my practice are feathers. Now, this is a feather fan that my sister made for me for smudging, and I do believe most of these feathers came from the local park, things that she picked up around the park. And so, I will often find bird feathers laying around, and I will pick those up and use those. I will use, like I said, the dried frogs. Sometimes what happens is we have a lot of toads and frogs around here. They will die or they'll get squashed by a car, which I always feel horrible about. But if I did actually find one in my old office. I found two of them. One of them was underneath the water bottles, which I couldn't figure out how he got there. But he was completely dried out, deceased. So I used him in some death oil. But, dead animals are good for death oil, but I will also use them in transformational magic. Another thing that I will use are animal bones. This, I do believe, is a rabbit. I found this in a little hutch in my front yard. I don't know what happened to the little bunny, but I mean, you can see these are like some spine bones here. I don't know what happened to him. I was walking through my yard and caught sight of like part of the bone, and so I moved some dry grass, and it was like a hutch, and the bones were all that was left. So I went ahead and harvested the bones, as many of them as I could, and I will use those. Rabbits are often associated with luck, with speed, with reproduction. So if there's something that you want to multiply in your spell, using rabbit fur or rabbit bones are very good. Now, I will state right here and now, I do not advocate for the harming of animals for the use of magical parts. And I know that, like in Chinese medicine, a lot of animals are being killed out and species are being eliminated because their parts are very highly prized for that purpose. I do not use them in that way, and I will not support that, so I don't purchase any of those products. I use strictly what I come across naturally, which has passed away of natural, or like in the case of, car hitting a bird, unnatural means. I do have some owl feathers from an owl that was hit by a car. Poor thing was completely unrecognizable, but I picked him up and moved him off the road, and got some of the feathers that way. So I will use things like that. I use it as a quill pen, actually, for spell writing, or sigil creation for spells. So I will use things that I find, but I will not harm an animal for the purpose of getting something from it to use in my craft. Now, those of you that are familiar with Lady Gravedancer, she uses chicken feet profusely in hers. You can get those from the grocery store by just going and requesting them from the meat department, I think, or they may even sell them in some of the Mexican shops. So I will use things that are already readily available, but I will not purposely go out and harm an animal to get materials from it to use in spellcraft. And I don't like people that do that or would be okay with doing that. So as far as the ethics go, here's what I'm going to say. If you choose not to use animal parts in your practice, that's okay. A lot of people don't. The fact is, animal parts have been used in witchcraft since the beginning of time, whenever people began the practice of witchcraft. Animal parts and animal skins and bones and things like that have always been very important in many of the native practices, and it's not that these are ever treated with disrespect. Quite the contrary, most often they're being treated with the utmost of respect, because it's the spirit of that animal that you are revering and calling upon to aid you in whatever it is you're doing and whatever story you're telling or what have you. And I feel the same way about the animals and animal parts and things that I use. It's done with respect for the animal and an understanding of what the animal represents magically, physically, etc. I do not advocate for the cruelty of animals. Again, okay. A lot of people just say, but you're a hypocrite because you eat meat. I do eat meat. People have always eaten meat. Again, it's the respect you have for the animal. When I purchase meat, I make sure that I get it from sources that are free range, no cages, that kind of thing. I am very conscientious about that, and it's something that I think is important. We've always had a good relationship with animals, and we can ourselves become prey. So I don't harangue anyone for their choices to eat meat or not eat meat. My daughter is vegan, so she doesn't take anything from an animal at all. I have seen a lot of people that claim to be vegan that still wear leather shoes and leather clothes. Well, where do you think that leather comes from? So, it's a matter of being conscientious of where you are and having respect for what you're using, in my opinion. So, again, this is my opinion. I'm sure there are many people who would disagree, but people have always used animal parts in witchcraft. Again, I think as long as you're not harming an animal for its sole purpose of getting something to use in your craft, because to me that just creates bad juju, and I don't think it's going to make your craft very effective. If you happen to come across the animal bones like I did, use them. If you happen to come across snake shed, I use a ton of that, and I can assure you that probably no animal is harmed in the shedding of that skin, because it's something that they do naturally, but it's something that I can utilize that connects me to that animal and its ability to pass between the physical world and the underworld. or to transform. I also use them in transformation magic. But I always put snake shed on the back of the scrying mirrors that I create, because it creates that portal between this world and the non-physical world. And snakes are known for passing between those worlds and disappearing very quickly and that kind of thing. So I find that they are very useful, but I would not go out of my way. I'm also not going to harass someone who uses animal parts, and I wouldn't care for that person very much if they told me that they were, you know, in fact, I wouldn't like them at all. I'd probably be doing something to stop them if they said they were harming an animal for its purposes. But I don't think that it does any good to harass people about what they use in their craft. It's People have their opinions and they're very tied to their opinions and they're not going to change them. As far as ethics go, if you are taking it from the perspective of harm none, then you would have to include animals in that. So you're not going to harm anyone for the purpose of your spellcraft. That would be an ethical choice. I choose not to harm another animal in the gathering of the materials I use, because harming another animal to use it is other than for a food source, is cruel. Now, here's what I will say. If you kill something, you better eat it, and you better not waste the life that you've taken, because you have taken a life, and you need to keep that in mind. You need to understand that when you take an animal's life, you are taking that essence of that animal, and so using the animal in full would be the best way to do that, ethically speaking, because you don't want to waste any part of that animal, and native cultures don't. They use every part of the animal in some capacity or other. So that's just, again, I mean, this is my personal opinion, and I know there's going to be a lot of people, I'm expecting a lot of harsh comments about this topic and about this video, but I really do believe that there's nothing unethical in essence in using animal parts in your practice. I think the ethics come in with how you treat animals and the respect that you have for the life that they are. But the same thing goes for plants. See, people don't think about plants, but plants are living creatures as well, and without them on this planet, we would be totally screwed. And in terms of the craft, we would be screwed, because how many of us use herbs and other things in our craft? You have to bear in mind respect for life above all. So when I harvest materials to use, I'm going to use something that has naturally passed away. It's followed that cycle of life, or it's something that was killed for food, and I don't want the other parts to be wasted. So that is something that I will keep in mind. But I don't think I personally could ever do that unless I had to keep my family alive. I don't even think I could keep myself alive doing it. So that's my spiel. Hope y'all have a wonderful weekend and have a wonderful Labor Day.